Hey guys, Ryan Cleckner with Gun University. We've covered the basic parts of a scope, and now we're doing this deep dive into each part of the scope to figure out how it works and maybe to even help you make some decisions when you're purchasing a scope and to see which features might be right for you. In this video, we're going to talk about reticles, the actual crosshairs in the scope that you're using to aim. Now you might be thinking, isn't just a reticle or isn't a crosshair just a crosshair? No, maybe that used to be the case. So quite a while ago, all you had was this, something simple. Now you can get crazy with all sorts of measurements and functions and tools and things in the reticle. And honestly, I think they can get even too busy to be used. But let's talk about the pros and cons of different types of reticles to maybe help you figure out which one you need. So the most basic style of reticle is what you're used to seeing. It's just a standard crosshair. Just a scope, you see that. That's about as basic as it gets. You aim at the center point. This is what was on scopes for a long, long time. Then we started getting some changes on this, like a duplex reticle, for example. That's very popular for hunting. A duplex reticle, all they did is made the outside edges of the crosshair thicker than the inside. And what this did is it allowed you to still have a fine aiming point for a precise aim, but thick enough bars on each of the sides to help you see them, because that's this trade-off that we're always going to deal with the reticle. If you get it thin enough, fine enough, precise enough to be able to get the exact aiming point, it actually can get hard to see. And if you get it thick enough so it's easy to see, it's really hard to aim carefully with it. So a duplex reticle maybe gave the best of both worlds. It allowed you to see where the center was and it got there, and this was fine for hunting for a long time. Then we started getting reticles with graduations or marks on them that allowed you to measure in the reticle. Now the reason measuring with a reticle was handy is there are ways we can estimate range with reticles. There are ways we can hold for elevation and for windage with reticles without having to dial. You can do an awful lot with them, but again, they can get too busy and out of control if you're not careful. Now the graduations and the marks in these reticles are going to change depending on if you have a minute of angle or a mil scope. We have other videos explaining what minutes and mils are. If that's something you're completely confused on, you might want to pause and go check those out and come back. But for now, just understand they're two different units of measurement that we use for scopes. So when I was in the military, we had mil dots. We literally had dots placed on the reticle exactly 1 mil apart, and they were in all 4 directions. Well, now we have hash marks usually to see. These don't appear on the same scope. That's what we have now, just showing you diagrams. It's very common now to have a scope that, let's say, every half of a mil is a small mark and every full mil is a big mark. What's nice about that is it's much easier for me to use and see that that is maybe 0.9 right there than it is to see what a 0.9 is on the dot. It allows for some more precision. Well, scopes also start having graduations down below. And some of these reticles I like to call Christmas tree reticles because they look like Christmas trees. They'll have this going on. See that? Happy little Christmas tree. This graduation down below is similar to these graduations here, but they get wider and wider because as you start holding higher and higher on a target, because the further away it is, the more you're going to need to hold for windage. So these might be 1 mil each, 3 mils, 4 mils, 5 mils, 6 mils, and you can also have the graduations to the side. And it just goes and goes and goes. Well, you can see real quick how busy this reticle can get. If you're target shooting, long range shooting, anything like that, this is the way to go. These reticles are game changers. They're amazing. If you're hunting, maybe not the way to go. That gets a little busy. It might be hard to actually see the animal that you're shooting or find the animal, especially when we're dealing with a first focal plane versus a second focal plane scope. Now, we also have videos on that if you need to go reference what the differences between first and second focal plane are, but here's just a reminder. First focal plane, when you change the magnification, the reticle and the image get bigger and smaller together. Second focal plane, reticle stays the same size while the image gets bigger and smaller behind it. It matters here because if I'm going to measure something and decide that it's exactly 3 mils tall, I better know which scope I have, because if it's a second focal plane scope, it might not really be 3 mils tall if it's on the wrong magnification. But if it's a first focal plane scope, guaranteed to be 3 mils tall. The problem with these complicated reticles on those first focal plane scopes are, if you zoom out and bring that power down on the scope, These marks can get so tiny and the lines can get so fine, they can be darn near impossible to see. So, just because a scope has a really fancy reticle doesn't mean you have to buy it. It doesn't mean it's necessarily right for you. And just because it has a simple reticle doesn't mean it's bad. I think you really need to look at your purpose that you're going to be using the scope for to decide which is right for you. For hunting, I like a duplex reticle or something nice and simple. When I'm target shooting long range, I love these graduated scopes. It saves me time when not having to adjust for my elevation because I can just hold above the target. It saves me time not having to adjust with the windage and guessing where it's at because it has all those graduations all the way down the way. And one of the things I bring up in my book that is so important, I try to hammer into people, is focus on the reticle. Do not stare at the target. If you have one of those Christmas tree reticles, you can still hold up and to the side while still focusing at the reticle. If the duplex reticle, you're kind of holding off from the clear spot and you have nothing to aim at, and it's not going to give you the results you want. Whichever reticle you get, make sure it is the units of measurement you are wanting to work with. Mils or minutes are not necessarily better or worse than each other. There's pros and cons to both of them. If you're getting into long range shooting and target shooting now, I would say go with mils because that's the most popular one now. Back when I learned it was minutes. But whichever one you get, just make sure that your reticle matches your turrets and get the reticle that's right for your application. You'll be fine.